Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global and sign up there to start getting emails from us. Our first hour is dedicated to media and virtual production. Any questions that you may have around those around those subjects. Our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about picking a mixer, analog, digital, online, software, hardware. We're going to talk about all of those things in the second hour. Tomorrow, we have the folks from AJA. They're going to be here talking about their Bridge Live product and answering your questions. And your job, when we bring these folks on, is to do a little research and come with questions. So take a look at what Bridge Live does, think about it, and come up with some questions early on so that we can keep the conversation really rolling. I think we have a lot of opportunities to do that kind of thing when we bring vendors in, but we have to be prepared. Thursday, we're going to talk a little bit more about Office Hours 2.0. We made a bunch of changes over the weekend, and yesterday did not go well, but now hopefully today will go better. And on Friday, we have the folks from Parsec here. They're going to be talking about their product. Same thing. Do some research, figure out this is your chance to ask the people that work on this to answer your questions. So make sure to take full advantage of it. On Saturday, of course, is education, 8 o'clock. We don't broadcast that, so you need to be here in Zoom. And then at 11, we will be cooking with Damayanti Gajar. And at 12:30, I didn't get it updated, but 12:30, we'll be doing the Belfast project. Back in Belfast, we will start broadcasting at 12. So it's still noon to be there. You'll see some behind the scenes before we get started. All right, let's get into the questions. Bill, what do we got?
The first one comes from our own Guy Cochran, and it is the most dangerous question we are asked here in Office Hours. Is today a panelist's birthday?
Is it a panelist's birthday? Oh, hold on a second here. Whose birthday is it? Go ahead, Jim.
I cannot tell a lie. It is my birthday today.
Hey!
All right. Everyone,
we
got a double.
Is it Rupert? Is it your birthday too? Rupert and Jim. What are the chances of having two people on a panel that have the same birthday? All right. So we'll have to do Rupert and Jim. All right. Here we go. Okay, everyone just follow. Let's see if we can get this working.
Un gusto.
Okay. Here we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Rupert and Jim. Happy birthday to you.
And many more.
Okay, it's much harder if people don't just sing the song. Like, I'm just letting you guys know, don't do that again. But a happy birthday to those guys. So it's so much harder. Like, we're just trying to fly here. Anyway, so all right. Happy birthday, Jim and Rupert. Great. It's great to have you here. All right.
Thank you very much.
You get to enjoy the train wreck. All right, next question.
Moving on, Daniel Goldstein is up from Washington, D.C., and Daniel asked, well, that's interesting, the cycle. 12 hours ago, the President of the United States and the President of China had a high-profile video call. Do any panelists have any information or educated guesses about what technologies were used when failure truly was not an option?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I can neither confirm nor deny any information, but if I had to design such a system, it would involve multiple layers of redundancy and several layers of encryption that is not available commercially.
I think you're probably accurate. Next question.
Daniel McFarland in the UK is up next, and Daniel's from Belfast, and he says, what is the status of yesterday's show recording, and when will it be available for viewing?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
March. No, I'm kidding. So I got the second half of the first half of the third half about 10 minutes ago. So I have a full day. So we'll see within the next 24 hours. I'll give it a try.
I didn't know it was, I didn't know where the other half was. So I was like, I don't know what happened to the other half. And then Dennis reminded us that he had recorded it. So we figured that out this morning. So anyway, we'll get it up there. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is next, and
you need
that.
Yeah, there we go.
One got stuck at the top. Yeah, Douglas Carmichael is up next, and he says, I've seen several cloud service providers entering the Mac in the cloud market, MacStadium, AWS, and so forth. When would you need a Mac in the cloud?
Go ahead, Guy.
Redundancy, bandwidth, those are the two biggest ones. Our own Tucker, he uses I believe it's MacStadium. It's an outfit out of Las Vegas to host his comm solution, so that way it's not coming into his house and he doesn't have to worry about power and bandwidth. Another one would be for cutting. So if you did want to use Mimo Live, you can bring in, like we could use a Zoom room as the contributor like we do here, suck those over NDI and push it in. The bummer about AWS and a Mac is that you got to turn it on for 24 hours per the licensing agreement. So something like MacStadium is a cheaper solution. There's also a Paperspace is the other one. So those are some options to look.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Also, if you're developing in the Mac environment, you need to spin up an environment to test something in a dev environment, or to spin up a workload just for testing or development.
Bill?
Rupert said exactly what I was going to say. Mac developers, I know, you all use MacStadium.
Yeah, I think that's actually the number one use of it is for development. Next question.
Moving on to Scott Mueller of Germantown, New York, looking for a pull-down retractable backdrop that I can ceiling or wall mount behind my position. All I can find in this style are chroma-green, and I'm looking for gray. Any suggestions?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Actually, I do have a suggestion for this, and it was something I was looking for myself recently. Roll-up blinds. Come in charcoal gray. Throw some light on them, and they change colors. And as you can see, they're fairly cheap. So it's just a simple option, and it's the sort of thing you can use with a couple of stands to hold up and just roll down, because remember, they're the sort of thing that fit inside a window frame.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So this is the one that I built a couple of years ago, and it is a chroma key, but or green screen, whatever you want to call it. And but you can do, how I did it was I went down to the hardware store, and I found a retractable blinds and or shade, blackout shade, and I just basically took off the vinyl off of that because that was a white, or you can get it in gray. I took the vinyl off and I ended up putting the vinyl in. Now, with that being said, using cloth, I tried it with cloth at first. It was really hard to retract because everything would start to wrinkle up. So you might want to use some fabric that's a little bit stiffer, like vinyl, if you can find it. That might put a little bit of gloss on the background if you do it. And the other thing is, if you have a pull down, I actually got rid of the pull down and turned it into a chain delivery system, which is easy to do. You can get the parts on Amazon or any hardware store for that matter. The reason why was because I was in the middle of an event, and my pull down retractor decided to give way, and the whole thing just snapped right back up to the top.
Go ahead, Bill.
I don't know if they still do it, but back in the day, they used to do custom. If the big screen manufacturers, Daylight and the rest of the ones who have installation systems for large corporate clients, you could specify a color and they would load it into one of their commercial units for you. So you might check that out if it all hasn't gone offshore.
We've used Daylight in the past for that, and you can get motorized or pull down, and those screens are really good. They're hard to light because of the way that the surface works, but if you want gray, you can get them there. Next question.
George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia is up next. He says, thoughts on the New York Times article today, The Worst of Both Worlds, as bosses try to navigate the new office environment. One company's rule, one on Zoom, all on Zoom.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I haven't read this article extensively all the way through, but this is a flavor of, I think, what's to come in terms of the ugly truth about hybrid really coming to be obvious. The fact is that I think companies are going to be faced with this challenge of employees, people, teams on calls, trying to be in the office, trying to be, on Zoom or whatever, and those two sets of people getting different levels of experience and different qualities and different standards of a work environment. If you look at all the things that companies have to bear in mind in terms of equality, inclusion, culture, that the moment you put people in a room and people, on a video call, those two sets of people are having different levels of experience. And if you look at, I think of it a lot like all the ADA stuff we saw a little while back. A lot of companies had to retrofit their, work environments to accommodate all sets of people. But now, work environments are built around those standards. And I think we're going to see the same thing here. You just cannot afford to give different sets of people different levels of experience.
One of the interesting things is that we got brought in. I got brought into something to have some conversations because we were working on it was a government facility in Europe, and they they were in there, and they said, "Oh, we use this all the time. We'll meet here. We'll join the Zoom from here." And so we got in there and we said, "We can't hear what you're saying." And they're like, "What are you talking about? We use it all the time." And I'm like, "Well, we know," but they said, "We just built it 2 years ago. It's state of the art." And we were like, "We know, but we can't hear what you're saying. It's echoing." And they're like, there was like this long pause, and they said, "Do you think it's like this all the time?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's like this all the time. If you do it all the time, it's like this all the time." And they were just horrified. They'd spent like, I mean, $1 million or hundreds of thousands of dollars on this one room to do what they want to do. We had another one where a CEO had never come into a conference room remotely in their company, did it during COVID, and literally had all the conference rooms rebuilt. Like, it was millions of dollars because he just realized that there was no one was understanding anything on the far end. So it's not that this is a new problem. This was always a problem. It was just that there were so many people, the decision makers were always in the conference room, and they didn't realize that it was unlistenable. Like all that glass and all those whiteboards and all those hard surfaces that they had built into it that look really pretty made it impossible for anyone to be on a conference room ever, and now they have to rethink all of those things, and it's really, as someone who had to deal with that 4 to 5, maybe 6 hours a day for a decade, it's all like that. It's all just a big mess. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, a lot of times, we'll begin a meeting and we'll say, can you hear me? Can you hear me? And the real question should probably be, can you understand me?
Yeah.
And it's hard because it's very difficult to look at a CEO or a C-level person and say, you don't look good, you don't sound good.
Right.
And yet somebody has to do it. And I think that their handlers need to be more protective of their image.
Yeah, no, absolutely. CEO should not be joining, C-suite should not be joining badly. Like it undermines their authority, within their own company, especially when more and more of their employees are showing up like we are. Like as people start to game up, like, so as people who want to be C-suite start to up their game and start getting better cameras and getting better mics and getting better everything else, the C-suite seems lesser than in the same meeting. And we've seen this already, where they just seem like you don't understand why they're running the company, because there's like 3 or 4 people in there that are much lower, like 3 or 4 rungs down from them, that look like broadcast and sound like radio, and they are in some kind of little whatever, and they look confused and dazed. Go ahead, Courtney.
Unfortunately, a lot of high-profile companies hire really top-name interior decorators to do their conference rooms, and they're like fish bowls, so they're all enclosed by glass.
Yep.
And so they design it on what's going to look the coolest, or it's all marble, or it's all reflective surfaces. They don't care about what it sounds like in a conference call. So that's frequently the problem.
I mean, the reality is if you just let everyone who wants to stay home and take out all the open office and give everybody their own little office again, so that they can have, an isolated area where they could join conversations, it would actually probably work. The people who want to go to work and they can be in part of virtual calls, and you give them great tools to do that. You could even say, if you really want to try to bring them in, we'll give you a telestrator and a great camera and everything else in the office. And you have to pay for it if you want to do it at home. And, and then people can make a decision. But then I think more people would want to go into the office. I think the open office is the part that every article you see doesn't talk about, the fact that everybody who works in an open office, not everyone, but 90% hate it, and that's why they don't want to go back. And if you gave them that back, they would probably come back. Next question.
Rupert McRae here on the panel from Dallas, Texas asks, do you tone down or dial up your setup depending on the kind of meeting you're in? And if so, why?
Go ahead, John.
I don't think I've ever toned down, but I do dial up. My other studio over here, Studio C, is my high-end system that Chris adjusted for his height. Now I have to go readjust all my monitors. But I do boot that one up for Office Hours 2.0 when we launch that, and when I'm talking to clients.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I also come up to this level for office hours. But when talking to friends and family, Zoom call to friends or family, I'm just on my laptop, the laptop speakers, and a plug-in 1080p webcam. So I do tone it up and down depending on who I'm talking to.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, what Courtney says, family is one level, everybody else is another. And I find that with my drop-down backdrop that I use every morning here, if I put that up or not, that tells me how serious I am about the meeting.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, same here. If I'm doing something with family or other things, you can basically still stand out just by having a quality background. I wouldn't have as many colors for some meetings as others, but it just depends on the group.
Yeah, I turn the light off and on. So if I feel like it's, I feel like it feels like I'm working too hard. A plain gray background is fine when I'm meeting with folks. And then in meetings that I don't think I'm going to talk a lot, I actually do turn, if I feel like I'm probably just listening and maybe have to say one or two things, I'll turn my camera off and leave it off until I especially if it's like a big meeting, there'll be like 15 people there and half of them have it on, half of them have it off. I'll slip into the background and listen, and then turn it on if I need to say something. Next question.
Tim McCullough in Wichita, Kansas up next. Now the guy is here. What's the status of the meeting meters project?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, this was a project for those of you who haven't seen it. It's basically like what WLM Mickey meters are here in the panel, so that people could come in and do a self-check, or if you're hosting a meeting, it would come in upon inviting it. And the plan was to use AWS auto-scaling and to use CloudFormation to build these up and spin up like 100 of these things. But the problem was that when we went to launch was that there's a lot of privacy concerns with a instance that can record being in somebody else's meeting, especially amid like stock or financial information or company insider information that we didn't want to be a part of. So we had to think of another way. And the next way is to use a Zoom app. So that's where we're at now, is we actually have to go about it entirely differently and just make it a Zoom app. So we need to get the SDK and it's got to be written. So it's paused at the moment, unfortunately. I still want to make it a free thing, but keeping that instance up it costs money. So we left it up for months, but on this last hit that it took on an update, we just haven't rebuilt it. It needs to be rebuilt. So that's where it's at right now.
Next question.
James Babbitt, San Diego, is up next with, on a new MacBook M1 Pro, M1 MacBook Pro, are there some good alternatives to the subscription version of Photoshop or Adobe, Photoshop from Adobe?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, Photoshop is obviously the 10,000-pound gorilla in that space, and that is both good and, in my opinion, bad. And the reason I say that is because it's been developed so long. It has everything that most people could possibly want to do, and a community that understands a lot about all of those deep, deep, deep capabilities, which means that if you try to use something else, you're always going to be a little bit disappointed. What I've found out, though, is that the other more agile, smaller programs, and there's a bunch, and I'm going to forget some of it, but in fact, there are lighter weight, better coded programs that do subsets of what Photoshop will do, and they do it less expensively and much faster, at least on my Macs. So I've migrated to them. Some of them have AI components. Some of them, and I'm just spacing on the names, but other people will talk about them. If you don't want everything that Photoshop does, there are a lot of ways you can satisfy what you might need to do, but it is still the 10,000-pound gorilla out there.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I'm using Affinity Photo, and they have Affinity Design and a few other programs. And then also I'm using Pixelmator Pro. It's a very nice piece of software. And if you want to get a little bit adventurous, you can try Luminar 4. Luminar 4 is the one without the subscription. They went to a subscription model, but go ahead, Alex.
How would you compare Pixelmator Pro and Affinity Photo?
They're very similar. They're very similar. And
are there operations that you do in one and not the other?
I'm mostly using Pixelmator Pro that I like. It seems to be a little bit leaner, faster, and better for me.
Got it. Jeffrey?
So the free version that a lot of people use is GIMP, and you can get that. It's absolutely free. It's on the open source spectrum there. But other than that, Photoshop does have, along with Premiere Pro, they do have a version called Photoshop Elements and Premiere Pro Elements. That is a CD digital download. It's a one-time purchase. You get some of the features of Photoshop, and they update it every year. So if you want to get the update, you just buy the new copy, and it's like $99 for the copy.
I kept on trying to use GIMP 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Like I'm gonna use GIMP. I'm gonna try to figure this out, and it just was so painful. It's such a painful app. It's just so bad. Anyway, so it is free though. That has that going for it. Affinity Photo is what I use probably 80% of the time. There are operations that I simply can't do without Photoshop. Like that doesn't exist in Affinity Photo. Primarily dealing with some old Photoshop tools as well as alpha channels. Like Affinity Photo doesn't really give you explicit alpha channels that you could work with. It does have some advantages. It's great for painting out 360 tripods. Just in case you're wondering, it's got a 360 projection in which you can, without doing the actual pixel convolution, paint out pixels, which is super powerful if you're doing 360. But I think Affinity Photo is great. I wouldn't buy it today. I'd wait until next week. It should be 30% off. So it should be, instead of $55, it'll be $40 or something probably next week. If they follow I think that they just have that on their website, 30% off coming for Black Friday. So I think that that's the heir apparent. I think that if someone's not going to use Photoshop, Affinity Photo's the one that has the most features. I do think the Pixelmator is a little lighter, as Michael said, but I had to learn one. I have both of them. I just had to figure out, like, this is the one I'm going down the path with. And it is the hardest part as a Photoshop user since 1991. The hardest part is figuring out, not that it can do it, it's how to get it to do the thing. There's just enough different that it's a painful process. But I force myself to open everything in Affinity. And if I can't figure it out, then I go to Photoshop. But I start in Affinity every operation. Next question.
Nick Pavlinak in Southeast Michigan says, what's the status of the Office Hours band? Are there any new songs coming out soon?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Soon, only not yet. The band is doing well. Thankfully, blessing our people got really busy in October. And we've got 2 songs that are about 80% tracked. But as we tweak things and everything gets better, then we go back and go, we need to go back and retrack that. So members are coming in, listening to mixes and saying, I want to retrack what I did because it doesn't live up to what everything else is now. So having that high standard and busy professionals makes the process run slowly.
I'm 100% behind retracking until it's just right, and there's no reason. It's not like we have a release date. And I go, Jeffrey.
To add to that, we also have the video aspect of things, and we don't want to do what we did with song 2, where we launched out the audio and then launched out the video. We want to do it at the same time. So the third song, the video, it's a very interesting concept. I'm not going to say, and actually both of them are very interesting concepts for the video, but we've got to do not only the audio, but also the video end of things.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, I was going to mention that aspect of it. I actually have video coming in every week or two. I get something on 4. So there's still behind the scenes action taking place. And I have to admit, I'm very fond of the song after the next song and what people are doing with the video part of it. That's all I'll say.
I just want to say I got my shirt like 2 days ago. I forgot that we could still get them. I thought I had missed the window. Where do you get what's the URL again? I ordered it, but I don't remember what it was. We should put it in
have the swag URL.
Put the swag URL in there. It's a great shirt. It's high quality. I haven't worn it yet. It's just brand new, but I opened it up and I was very happy with it. So there it is. So anyway, I might get more swag. So, because this would be the time that you knew when. I just wanted to see it. I'd never gone to that site before. There's 1,000 things. I guess you put your logo up and it's 1,000 things that it could be part of. So anyway,
can I just say one more thing? I'm still astonished at the quality of the musicians and the quality of the producers and everybody else that we have attracted to this project. It is astonishing how much I've learned just watching these people work. It's been fabulous.
Well, absolutely. Now, next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he said, what would be the best curriculum to learn iOS development?
Oh, go ahead, Jason.
It depends on the kind of student you are. At the end of the day, that's just how it is. So it's, of course, Stanford CS 139 is an excellent thing if you don't need any hand-holding. and Coursera, Udemy, if you need a little bit more hand-holding.
Go ahead, Bill.
We would be remiss if we didn't mention Apple's Swift's initiatives. A lot of the programming for those iOS apps are now being done in Swift, and they have a really powerful program all the way for grade schoolers and pre-grade schoolers, all the way up through professional stuff. And I think development is hot and heavy in that space.
I would say that I strongly believe that the best one to get started with is codewithchris.com. So codewithchris.com, he's focused on it. It's really approachable. You are building apps immediately. You learn while you go. He's a great, host, for those things. I don't know him at all, but I've subscribed to his thing. So, and it kind of, as we started office hours, I was starting to program, and then as we started office hours, I can't do programming as well as work, as well as everything, as well as office hours. So, so I've been a little bit behind, but I found that I've tried almost everything to kind of get started to build little apps. And I found this one by far to be the most approachable. Codewithchris.com. Next question.
Christian Pure Mamulan, it looks like, from Wolfsburg, Germany, says, does the panel know of any SDK or beta tester Blackmagic inroads providing just the drivers for the ATEM Mini? He says, because connected as USB webcam to my employer-provided laptop, I am sorely missing some of its functionality.
Go, Jason.
My sound is completely off, so I'm going to pass.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yes, there is a good SDK. Just go to the Blackmagic website, click on support, and scroll down there, pick what you want to do. Let's say the ATEM switcher products. It looks like nothing happened when I clicked on that, but if you look down here, it changes the bottom of the page. There's an ATEM switchers SDK, and they publish a new one every time a new version comes out. You can get it for the Mac or for Windows. And in that SDK, you will find not necessarily the drivers, because you do have to download and install the software, the ATEM software control to get the drivers installed for either. But once the drivers are installed, then the SDK will give you the basic Ethernet protocol that's used to communicate between all of their products, the switchers and the encoders and things like that, that they use to talk to each other. And from there, you can develop a program that will control them yourself.
One of the big reasons that we really got into Blackmagic was specifically because the SDK is so strong. They really, it's not just that they publish something that you can kind of talk to. They have a 20 by 20 booth at NAB when NAB was running. I'm sure it would have been 80 by 80 this time for developers, where they do talks and they talk about what you can do and they really show you how to do it. They really, it's definitely part of what they view as an initiative within their company. Like, it adds value to their company, and they take it very seriously. And I don't know of any other video company that takes it as seriously as they do. So it's one of the reasons that we kept building around them. Next question.
Aaron Husledge here from the Panelists from Durham, North Carolina, says, can someone think of a way that we can route a PL from Unity into the returns of a VDO.ninja?
Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, so there's a method using OBS, and if your Unity server has a Dante IO sort of add-in, then you can pull that audio into OBS and then push it out to VDO, and I can send you a link in the Discord channel.
Go ahead, Stuart.
If I recall correctly, Unity has NDI output. You can just open that as an input source if you've got the virtual mixer running or virtual input running. That's on the Chrome browser for the best performance.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, and Aaron, I think we could probably test that pretty easily on our setup here. So, we have that Unity server with the multiple groups, and we kind of essentially do that for other things like Zoom and whatnot. So it shouldn't be a problem. Of course, usually we have the BSS in the mix there somewhere, but ping me.
Next question.
Austin Corson in Portland, Oregon has an interesting question here. What kind of video system is used for onboard video in Formula One? After a controversial move this past weekend, the announcers mentioned that the cars are only streaming one camera at a time and the rest of the video is stored on board.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Firstly, as someone who's been part of the motorsport media, getting information about the specifics of those systems is very, very difficult. They keep it close to the chest. What I can tell you is they are very small cameras that used to be termed lipstick cameras. They're an SSD-based recorder because you simply cannot use hard drives under those G loads. It's basically just a box that is provided by Formula One's own internal video production. And in other notes, Mac's crash happened, should have been given the meatball flag 2 laps earlier. We'll discuss that on Full Course Yellow on Thursday night.
I don't know how they do it on their cameras. I can show you how we do it on Indy cars. Let's see here if I cut to. So this is one. Oops, this is one we did a couple of years ago. So what we did here is that we had a GoPro. We actually had 2 GoPros put on it with 2 Teradeks. They let us super glue them to the car. I guess they refinish the cars all the time. So they were like, we don't care. And so we super glued this to the car. Now this is not one that's actually racing. This is a dual seater that Mario Andretti does. He does a incentive, these things where you pay $1,000 to be on a racetrack with Mario Andretti. And so we had one looking outward and one looking back at the person. It was a press person that we were going to talk to live. So the key is we wanted to stream it and we wanted to actually talk to them while they were in there, which we thought would be really, really amazing to hear how their experience was. And all it was just screaming and swearing, and like there was just a whole lot of and that was the whole experience. And they didn't even talk to the person that was there. But anyway, we had audio and video going back and forth to the car using these Teradeks. We needed the Teradek to convert it to bits, but then it was a closed receiver that was used by, it was a closed band receiver or transceiver that was used by a company called 3G Wireless. They do a lot of NASCAR and Indy stuff in the United States. And so what they did is they actually built a mesh. So around the Sonoma Raceway. Sonoma Raceway is a little harder because it's not an oval. So it's got all kinds of curves. And so they built, I think we had either 6 or 8 antennas on the raceway, and it built a mesh to properly hand that off. And getting all of the latency and everything else right was complex, and one of the challenges were that we did the test actually with the cameras I took my car out I was only allowed to drive 25 miles an hour, like through it and I told them at speed, it's not going to work. And so we had to basically, as we did other people before our person, we had to tune the system. So we had about, I think 5 or 6 tries, and didn't work until the one before the person that we needed. So it's complicated at that speed, going through those zones. It's super complicated to get those things going. Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, none of that's going to work on Formula One. It's all a digital link back to the helicopter that's flying overhead. And I should just point out an aside for how you said about the voice and the person's. Go back 15 years ago and jet sprint boats, and we had a camera operator that literally had a camcorder gaffer taped to their hand, and the vision's unusable, and all you could hear was him screaming in terror as the sprint boat ran. And 10 years before that, I stuck a lipstick camera in a sprint car wing looking down at the driver, and we literally pointed a UHF aerial at the car as it went round to record it. The link coming back is difficult to get to work, and Formula One have spent so much money on that. You could build a broadcast center from it.
I'll see. I know some folks at Formula One. I'll see if we can get them to come in, and some that are there and some that are formerly there.
Second hour. Yes, please. Second hour.
Let me talk to those. Let me talk to. That'd be really fun. So let me see who I can get and what they're willing to say. I will say that Formula One's. I know a little bit about their infrastructure. It's unbelievable. Like, it is unbelievable. It's these huge containers that are all designed to just, cam lock together, that just get stacked up. And we've got some former Pixel members that ran it for a while. So it was, we'll see what we can do. Next question.
Jim Hankins here on the panel this morning from Chesterfield, Michigan, has the next question. Are any panelists using Wowza Media Engine in their pipelines, and what has been your experience?
I don't know if there's anything that we do. We used to use Wowza a lot more. I don't know if there's anything we do that we don't use Amazon's services now compared to Wowza. I mean, we kind of moved away from Wowza related to that. Jim, is that your experience, or is that?
Yeah, I'm just wondering because I have a side project that I'm working on that's using it, and kind of the first time I've run across it. So just wondering.
It's a powerful engine, but as we got better at AWS, we just kind of slowly moved off of it. I think the big advantage is that you're paying for the instance to sit on Amazon, you're not paying for the bit rates, going out. And so that was the main reason you use Wowza instead of AWS. But I feel like AWS is more integrated and works more smoothly. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says, what specific niche do you see TikTok filling in the social media landscape?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I think there's a couple sides to this. What they're filling, I'm not sure. I mean, they're able to take a little bit of the market, in terms of short form, highly creative content. But I think really their business model is the more important question. They are clearly, in the data business, and I think what their value proposition is to the advertisers in the quality of the data they can accumulate.
Go ahead, Jeffrey. Real quick, we're going to start moving a little bit faster.
Totally agree on that. I think TikTok is a one-trick pony, and other companies are starting to do the exact same thing. So as long as they keep members, they keep people coming to the eyeballs coming to the app, then they'll have a place in the market. But other than that, they could fall apart, just like many other social networks that already have.
Go ahead, Stuart.
I'm going to be blunt. TikTok, as it appears at the moment, is a platform for getting young ladies to do things that they will be used against them later, and young men to do things they should be ashamed of now. It is really scraping the bottom of the barrel with the majority of the content on there.
I'll argue against that. So, because that's what you see. It's like the brush that you see as you go into a forest. Like all the brush at the very beginning is all the silly stuff that you see that is just absurd. I have 3 different phones with 3 different accounts, and I do this on purpose, and I reset them. I create new accounts on one of them all the time to see what the new person's experience is versus one that. So the most mature one that I have is almost all cooking how-tos, interesting things. A lot of animals. My kids like animals, and so there's a lot of cats and dogs. What's interesting is you never see any of the stuff that you just mentioned. There's it never ever shows up in that feed. And it's just this deep, and there's all kinds of, really interesting musicians doing incredible things in very short periods of time. And it's a really, I'll push back a little bit on it because you're absolutely right. When you first turn it on, it is the goofiest thing. And it takes about 2 or 3 hours to train it to what you want. And as soon as you train it, it becomes this other world of you're just constantly going through all these really interesting little paths. So I would highly recommend I've been producing, not for myself, but for other people, producing stuff for TikTok, since it was Musically. so I know it pretty well. And I will say that it's a pretty amazing platform, and the algorithm is a thing, we can say that everybody can do it. I'm not sure that it's not the algorithm anymore. It's the size of the algorithm. It's the size of the sample. Makes it very, very hard to compete with, and people will try. It's just really hard to get the same culture, into the same spin. Next question.
James Hutchinson up next from Dublin, Ireland, and asks, has anyone noticed that the zoom highlight frame has changed color? It now seems to have a green gradient to the sides, or has it always been like that?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So I had not noticed this, but for a different reason, I was actually looking at that square yesterday, and I really don't think it was like that yesterday. It was pretty sure it was a solid green before, but I am seeing that gradient now. But I looked through the release notes, and I don't see any changes there relating to this. And my version hasn't changed in the last couple of days, so I am actually wondering what's going on.
That is weird. I just noticed it now too, but only because you said it. Interesting. Next question.
Bethany in Mexico is up next. Says, which are your favorite tools or websites for productions?
Go ahead, Jeff.
So websites, I like draw.io for making flowcharts of how we're going to put systems together. And also there's a free online notator that I need to find the website of, but I'll put that in the show notes here. It is avidcaster.net. I'll put actual links in there. And then I use Keynote a whole bunch for lower thirds.
Absolutely. Next question.
Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany is next, and he says, today's Dell's Black Friday e-catalog arrived. Most of the offered monitors are temporarily not available. Has anybody had a similar experience in the U.S.?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
You know, what's really interesting is being an influencer. I get asked all the time to look at products and talk about products, and then sometimes they send me products to review. And I've had a few that said, "Hey, can you review the product?" And I go to look, and it's completely unavailable. So yeah, it is happening in the U.S. Of course, we've got the whole container issue, boats flying. But you know, the one cool thing is, what could be unavailable today, tomorrow could be fully in stock. So it is a waiting game. But yeah, for something like that, I'm not exactly sure, but I know in the U.S. You can have turnover pretty quick.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Here locally, there's a big box retail office store that I tend to walk around when my wife is in an adjacent store. But on a fairly regular basis here for months, the computer monitor aisle has been completely bare.
Stuart?
This isn't just a US thing. This is pretty much a worldwide thing at the moment. I mean, if I go looking for lenses for just about any brand or cameras or hardware at any of the local suppliers, there's so much stuff that is just listed as not in stock. And the few places that list that they do have it, small stores that are basically trying to get your sales so that then they'll go and order. So yeah, it's a worldwide thing at the moment.
Next question.
Chris Taylor, Carlsbad, California. Up next is if a Zoom panelist is demoted to attendee and they leave the webinar and then return later, do they come back as a panelist or as an attendee?
Go ahead, Jason.
If they're demoted, they come back as as an attendee. If they leave, like I just did to fix my sound, which I'd like to explain, that was an interesting one, then you pop right back into the panel.
Next question.
Sean Callahan in Sonoma, California is up next with, what talkback headset do you recommend for use with the Blackmagic Studio cameras? Which is better, 5-pin XLR or 3.5 millimeter TRR tip ring sleeve connectors?
I'll lean towards the 5-pin XLRs because I've sheared the the TRRS one on a Blackmagic camera. So I think that the 5-pin has a little bit more beef to it and it's a little easier. What I've used for that and I haven't used the 5-pin with the studio cameras yet, but as 5 pins go, I would recommend looking at the Clearcom headsets. They are expensive, but they're really nice. You get double muff or single muff. Some people like light versions of them. I like a double muff because when I'm in shows, I don't want to hear anything else. I don't want anyone to talk around me. I'd rather have programs sent into my system than for me to have anything else going on. Next question.
It comes from longtime panelist Jeff Francis here on the panel from Columbia, South Carolina. Simple streaming system. He's looking for advice. Stereo pair of mics into the camera, HDMI into amp. Amp is streaming, and he needs a clever way to add reverb into the audio in the amp.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
This is going to be completely off base, but try putting springs in front of the microphones, because the springs will create the natural reverb when sound passes through it.
I do have a spring reverb, but that's not the answer I was looking for.
What is the answer you were looking? This was a test, and we failed.
Yeah. No, it's not. I don't know the answer yet. I'm trying to come up with clever ways, because while the Fairlight mixer has EQ and dynamics, it does not have reverb in it. So I've thought about taking the headphone out of the multi-view monitor and feeding it into a reverb and feeding that back into the line input of the ATEM Mini Pro, which of course is a feedback loop. I understand that, but running it down, at minus 20 dB with 100% wet reverb, I will get reverb on top of reverb, but that's not necessarily such a big issue.
Interesting.
And the room is really dry, so I can't put up a set of ambient mics because there's really not any ambience to capture there. I really need artificial reverb without using another computer. Or dragging in an entire Dante system, putting my mics into the Dante system, putting reverb through that, which is probably where I'm going to end up. But
That was my thought. I was like, well, just add another piece of
I
equipment.
was
here.
trying to be clever.
Yeah, I was going to suggest a
my
sidechain
waist-
Apollo unit or something, and because they've got all those reverbs built in. But if you don't want another computer, you're sunk.
Go ahead, Marty.
My way still works.
Marty.
What about a stomp box that would be used for instruments? You could get reverb. Well, you'd need to put a mic preamp in front of it, and then you could put a reverb in it, and then go into
now we're back to extra boxes, though.
Yeah,
that was the challenge.
But it's not a computer.
There you go. All right. Next question.
Julian Meinhold, Dortmund, Germany is up next, and he says, in Zoom for iOS, is there a way to choose which camera on the back is used?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I see Jason is after me. I hope he's got a solution, because as far as I know, there is no way to do this. And there's not even a way to get a good 16:9 image into Zoom from an iPhone. It's still 4:3, and you can't even get 1080. So please let there be a solution. Not that I'm bitter.
Yeah. Jason.
Yeah, there is. Open the Zoom app, but don't sign in. Tap the screen on your phone and then select the icon to flip to the rear-facing camera. And from there, you can actually pick it. I'll put a link in.
Wow. Okay. Jason for the win. Next question.
Jonas Natel in Stuttgart, Germany, a show friend, says, can you have multiples of iOS apps on
iOS apps?
Oh, iOS apps on the M1.
I actually don't know what iOS is. unless it is iOS.
iOS.
Yeah, iOS instances. So if you have an iOS
yeah.
app you like, can you run 3 versions, 3 instances?
Not that I know of. I mean, the way you do it with regular Mac apps is to just duplicate the app, like actually copy it again into another folder, and then you can open it 3 times or 2 times or whatever. It sometimes can lead to unexpected consequences. Go ahead, Josh.
Just a suggestion, maybe using the iMazing application might be able to get you another one.
Next question.
Jonas Datel, Stuttgart, Germany, back again. Is there a better documentation for the Apple APIs than the one provided by Apple, especially for AV Foundation?
Go ahead, Jason.
I really like the work that Swift by Sundell has done. I think you should look there first.
Next question.
Next one comes from Daniel McFarlane in Belfast in the UK. And Daniel says, how underrated is AppleScript for Mac automation tasks?
How underrated? Very underrated. we have a really great, when we do ask that question again, when we're doing the breakdown when Andy's here, and he can talk to how we start up all the computers for Office Hours 2.0, and everything's all this integration between OSC and AppleScript and everything else that all just kind of builds the whole thing. And we actually got some pretty high-end help for that. It's really cool. Go ahead, Jeff.
It's not AppleScript. It's a little baby brother Automator. I'm going to give a shout out for Automator because that is super useful on the Mac. Basically, if you're doing something more than twice, you should put in the time to automate it if you can.
Yep. Next question.
Christian Ortiz and second +1 for Automator in South Florida says, has anyone used the Blender application with the USDZ export plugin, and how was the output result?
I did do some tests with it, and I found it just couldn't export the textures. I think that if you export, I think it's GTLB or whatever from Blender, I think you could get the textures, but it's pretty rudimentary. I mean, that's really the challenge that we're having with almost everything right now, is that the exports, unless something has changed in the last couple months, which it might have, the USDZ market is moving very fast right now. Everybody's trying to get involved, especially now that Procreate handles USDZ and lets you paint on models. So this is a fast-moving target, and so you'll just have to keep tracking it. Next question.
Peter Rosado in Las Vegas, Nevada says, has anyone in the Office Hours family watched the Adele performance at Griffith Observatory? My wife and I watched it, and I viewed it through the Office Hours lens, and the production seemed very impressive. Seems that it racked up 10 million views against the NFL.
I think quality-wise, it looked amazing. I did look at pieces of it after our talk yesterday. Go ahead, Marty, and then go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, I thought it was really well done, and of course they can afford to do it that way. Lots of cameras, helicopters, drones. The night sky over LA was just gorgeous, and the projection mapping on the front of the Griffith Observatory. The content in the projection mapping, the ocean, in the last song, the ocean waves they were just amazing.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it was an amazing bit of logistics, and I think I heard that they actually they were all set to do it and to record it, and they predicted 100% chance of rain that night, and they had to move it with 1 day's notice to another night. And that whole thing, if you saw in some of the drone footage, you'd see off to the right, which is normally a parking lot, was just full of tents and stuff, because the entire audience was stacked with people that Adele had invited, and there are a lot of celebrities, movie stars, etc., and there was a big party going on after that. So the logistics were just enormous in that setup, and they had to, at a moment's notice, move the thing to another night.
I think that, and I don't know exactly, like for me, what I noticed is that I thought that the quality was extremely high. I didn't feel it compelling enough to watch it for very long. I just feel like that concert experience is not something that and I don't know if it's just me or not. Like, I just know that admittedly, most of the concerts I've worked on in the last 2 years, I've been at, like shooting them. So I think that after that experience, I had a hard time, like, just being engaged. And I don't know whether that's a function of all of us together. Like, if I don't get to talk to the artist, I'm not sure if I want to watch it. I just can't, I don't have an answer for it. I just noticed that I just was like, okay, I saw it, and then I moved on. Next question.
Stefan Fischer, Wurzburg, Germany, is back. Has anybody made the first steps with Vimeo virtual events platform?
Good guy.
Yeah, I really got to question why anybody would, actually, because you got to look at the pricing of it, and it doesn't seem to make very much sense. I'm pulling up the screen so you guys can see
How
what the
expensive is
pricing
it?
looks like. So for $75 a month, you get up to 100 webinar registrants, whereas with Zoom, you get up to 500, and it's $79 a month, and then you
Right.
only get 7 guest speakers on. And I mean, this is what it looks like in the back end. So you can see that you add your speakers, you can add some scenes, and in those scenes you can do 2-ups, 4-ups, 7-ups, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. I mean, it's just, I don't get what they're thinking, trying to compete with Zoom on this. You can push it to your own RTMP address, so you can stream it to something like YouTube and pick up as many viewers as you want. But 100 webinar registrants is what you get out of the box. And it is 1080p, though. That I will give them that at the gate, you don't have to do anything special. So if it is a small webinar, maybe that is the way to go, like a board meeting, something like that. It might be cool, but I'd say play with it. There's a demo version available. That's what I'm testing with here.
Sounds like it's after hours lab session. Let's think about when we can do that. Rupert, real quick.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think this is something they're doing to cater for their customers who are heavily baked into Vimeo, who need something, or else they're going to go elsewhere.
Yeah. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia, and here on the panel is up next. He says, in recent interviews promoting the film, Dwayne Johnson mentioned a song by the Yahoos that has not safe for work lyrics. How much influence does it have on the band's online presence to be mentioned by a major name for songs that are not actually radio friendly?
Go ahead, Jeff.
What is radio?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know if radio is that. I mean, it's relevant, I guess, in some
Place
parts
with
of the world.
clean show rules for the general public.
I know, it's just that who listens to it. Like, I can barely remember the last time I heard a radio station. Next question.
Jeff Francis is up next from Columbia, South Carolina, here on the panel. Jason, what was the cause of your audio issue?
Oh boy, I'll make this real quick. I lost power, and the M1 Mac started drawing power from the Thunderbolt 4 lead, which caused a nasty ground loop.
Sorry, just like that connection. Just that was not. Anyway, next question. This is what we're talking about with USB-C and Thunderbolt and everything else of the fact that the power can go both ways. It's a horrible idea. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, has anyone tested the new Waves SSL EV2 channel strip plugin?
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, it just came out yesterday. It's an amazing plugin. I know you shouldn't view plugins by how they look, but a lot of times on review sites and forums, they review how it looks and how it's laid out. And this thing is beautiful. It's just beautiful. And if you've ever listened to early recordings, the SSL 4000, which is what this plugin emulates, has been used on so many records. David Bowie, tons of sounds that you just would recognize right away, that particular sound of the SSL board. And this plugin has over 600 presets built into it, and you can run it in clean, or you can run it saturated with the harmonics and drive the compression and get all that richness of that SSL board. So they hit it out of the park with this one. They really did a great job, and I highly recommend it very much. And it's only $39. Hear that, Alex? It's only $39.
It's already in the cart. Next question. While you were talking,
Adrian Allback in Brisbane, Australia, with Apple's push into immersive audio, will Logic Pro and other ever replace Pro Tools as the studio's mixer of choice for software, and if so, when?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Not until it's cross-platform and it integrates with video and film production very well.
Go ahead, Michael.
There are millions of Logic users. So I don't know if it's ever going to replace Pro Tools. Pro Tools is the standard, but there are so many Logic users out there that it's go ahead,
really,
Alex.
Really big pyramid. Pro Tools owns the top bit of it.
Right.
But Logic is just churning up the market. That's the thing that's happening, the lower part of the pyramid. So does it replace it at the film level? Does it replace it at the very high end? I don't know if it does, and I don't know if Apple cares. Like literally, I don't think that's Apple's target, both with Final Cut and Logic. And by the way, I don't know how I ran across it, but there are these random on different people's channels. There are the Phineas is like talking about how he builds Billie Eilish's songs in Logic. It's like a master's class, and he just kind of nonchalantly just goes, "Oh, well, this is how I did this, and this is how," and he just goes through tracks and kind of walks through it. And it's not one channel; it's like showing up in different channels of, I guess he's willing. We got to see if we can get him on. so that's all I can say. It looks like people just asked him to come on, and he just comes on and talks about it. I don't know what the deal is, but he is so articulate about the use of Logic that Apple should just pay him a couple $1 million a year and just have him just do videos all the time. Like just, between albums or whatever, let us pay you more than you're making on the album, which would cost a lot of money. It'd be worth every penny for Apple just to have, because he is so good at talking about it. It's, anyway, I would highly recommend doing some searches, because I got sucked in for like an hour and a half last night watching his videos on Logic. Next question.
Joseph Mueller in Ontario, Canada says, Courtney Gooden, how many hats are in your collection, and what is your favorite and why?
I don't know. I have a lot of hats. So many I've never counted them. I wore this one today. This is my Local 695 hat in celebration of the fact that the West Coast production locals have signed a new agreement for the next 3 years. So there will not be a strike in Hollywood, and production can continue for the next 3 years. And I have my favorites, whatever's close. I have 4 or 5 that fit well, and the older ones that don't rotate as often get covered with dust, and so I don't wear them very often because I'd have to clean them.
All right, last question for the first hour.
John Merrill from Phoenix, Arizona says, I used to get spatial audio in my AirPods Pro on office hours, but not now. Something changed? Netflix, YouTube, and so forth?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I'd like to know whether this is talking about spatial or just good quality stereo, and whether we're talking about an iPad or an iOS device or a Mac. Mm-hmm. But I wonder whether it's a reoccurrence of the stereo getting collapsed with a phone dialed into the meeting, maybe if it's just office hours specific, but if it's Zoom in general. I do see that AirPod behavior can get knocked out of whack sometimes during a Zoom update. So just go in there and check your settings and maybe reset things a little bit.
Go, Jason.
Yeah, I misread this. I thought he was talking about the Pro Max, which can actually choose whether or not it spatializes stereo feed, and that's in settings under under Bluetooth.
I will save you the time. I'm assuming that you're watching it on an M1 computer is what you're using that for. The M1 converts surround currently to mono. So just in case you're wondering, not that I'm bitter, but not that it didn't take me like an hour to figure this out. So right now there's a bug in the OS. Hopefully they'll fix it, but it's converting. If it's tagged as spatial, if it's tagged as stereo, it comes out stereo. If it's tagged as spatial, it comes out as mono. So anyway, so that if you're on an M1 of any kind, I believe it pretty much does that. If you're on a phone, the way to look at that is take your iPods or whatever and look at a phone with the same show, and you'll see that you'll have spatial experience, and then go to an M1, and you won't. It'll be right down the middle. So anyway, that's there you go. All right. Changing subjects to our next area here, our second hour. We are, and by the way, I have a request for the folks on Tuesdays. Tuesdays, because I'm so committed that we talk about sound issues on Tuesdays, it's the hardest day for me to fill for a second hour, because I'm not, I always want it to be something that will attract our experts, that will attract people that are interested in it. So I request more suggestions in the second hour for sound specifically. And the second thing is, whatever that request is, make it something that we can talk about as a group. Not like, can we bring in someone, or can we bring that person in? That's harder. So things that we could discuss. I'm not saying that we won't have more people that we invite. I got a couple great people that I'm talking to about for December, but my request is that people put something out in the second hour for audio, because I'd love to make sure that I really want this to continue to be kind of a really geeky, deep conversation about important subjects around audio. But I just have trouble figuring out what those would be and what would attract everybody here. So put those into second hour and vote on them, so that I know that that's something that more than one person wants to see. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
First one comes from Joseph Mueller in Ontario, Canada. Audio sample rate 44.1 kilohertz or 48 kilohertz. Is there a noticeable difference, and what do you use for office hours?
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to give you exactly one reason to use 48, and it is the broadcast standard. Other than that, probably not. 44.1, I believe, is the standard for CDs.
Go ahead, Greg.
44.1 for music, 48 for anything with video.
Jeff?
So the sample rate determines the frequencies that the digital system can store. So cut that number in half, and you can have from 0 hertz up to that. You and I cannot tell the difference between 22 kilohertz bandwidth and 24 kilohertz bandwidth, so it doesn't matter. Early on, digital had a problem because we needed to remove high frequencies before we did the conversion, and that was called an anti-alias filter, because aliasing was a bad thing that we didn't want. That was tough to do when we were sampling right at those rates, but actually every converter now available does something called oversampling. So we actually are sampling 256 times that number. So we're sampling like at 11 megahertz, and then in math, that is converted down, and they do a digital brick wall filter that takes out frequencies above half the sample rate, that Nyquist frequency. So audio difference between the two of them is basically nil.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it is negligible in the fact that in office hours or anything in Zoom is going to get re-encoded into MPEG-4, so it's going to go through lossy compression anyway. So it don't matter.
The only thing I will say is I agree that for us, we would consider it, we will always work at 48 and sometimes deliver at 44. And it's because we're video driven. And if you get into some conversion issues when you start to use one or the other. Go ahead, Marty.
It's important to know what your delivery medium is going to be and what the project rate is going to be. You can always go down. If you shoot at 48, you can always go down to 41, but it's much harder to go up from 41 to 48.
Go ahead, Marty. Oh, that was Marty. Go ahead.
That was me.
Sorry, I clicked on the wrong button on my end. I was off. There's a thing that I'm doing on the back end that keeps track of it for me as well as for the computer. Anyway, go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say, the one time that you really want in the video realm to pay attention to this is if you bring in 44.1 kilohertz material into a 48 kilohertz timeline. This is the number one cause of audio drift over the course of time. So that video standard of 48, do whatever transcoding you need to do before you bring stuff in, and you will avoid a lot of hassle.
One other thing about that is that I'm not sure if it's still the case, but for a long time, YouTube would actually drift if you gave it 48 and be locked on for audio if you gave it 44.1. So it can be because its base unit was 44.1, and so it had to do this weird conversion in between. And so if we sent something up and encoded it at 48, so no matter what we brought into an encoder at SDI, we'd always convert it. We still always do convert it to 44.1 for YouTube because it will. And I don't know if they fixed it, but for years it was a thing that we would get an extra probably frame and a half of accuracy by doing that. Now go ahead, Jeff.
One last vote for 48. While the Dante system can run at anything from 44.1 to 192, there are a huge number of Dante devices, especially installation things like Symmetrix installation boxes that only run at 48K. So you may be locked into that. Lower end Yamaha consoles can only run at 48K, the TF series.
And I'm told that some of the reason 48 is because of its relationship with 24 and Avid and everything else. And so if you're doing film, it also wants to be 48. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas has our next question. What makes Neve Mixer so special other than the name?
Go ahead, Marty.
Well, Rupert, there's this other gentleman named Rupert, Rupert Neve, who is a brilliant electronic circuit designer who, has made Neve's boards sound the way they do.
But what does make it sound that way, Jeff?
It's really good design. It is quality components. It is large power supply rails. So the actual power supply rails are larger, so you can get higher swing. It's higher bandwidth. So bandwidth in Neve consoles is well beyond the 48 kilohertz we're talking about. And also just workflow. They're easy to work on, meaning you can actually do what you need to do on the mixer because the controls are within reach.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, it's funny. On the online forums, the Neve guys will say, well, we weren't trying to get any particular sound. We weren't trying to color the sound in any particular way. But the earlier boards, the early SSLs do have a color, do have a definite sound to them. Whereas the 9000 series and some of the more modern boards are very clean and clear and transparent, yet still have that SSL sound. So it is a sound that you hear on recordings, and it's coveted by musicians because they want to sound like their favorite artist.
Next question.
Joseph Mueller in Ontario, Canada is up next. What bit size do you use on your mix pre for Zoom? Is 24-bit good enough or 32-bit float best?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, 24-bit is good enough. And if you're not recording, if you're just going to be using it as a USB interface, I think the USB interface is always at PCM.
Yeah,
24-bit. So you're not going to get 32-bit up into Zoom or into office hours. But for recording, 32-bit float, and for connecting to the internet, just record at 24.
Yeah, the real advantage of 32-bit float is when you're field recording and you have, you can be recording a lot of other things, but when you're field recording, the main thing is you have to go in fast, you have to record quickly, you get your levels to a relatively close to where they need to be, and you have an enormous amount of dynamic range. So if you're a little off one way or the other, you can recover that in post. Although a lot of post tools don't support 32-bit well yet. They're still coming up to speed. So you have to kind of figure out how you're going to convert that. But the main thing is that that data is all sitting there, and so it doesn't have to run into a limiter. It doesn't get clipped. It just all of the recording is still there. It's kind of magical, but again, it's not something that that you need all the time. Go ahead, Courtney.
And it does use the 32-bit, of course, uses 30% or 25% more bandwidth and more storage space than the 24-bit does.
Although as a video person, I always look at audio as like, like there's so much space there. Like it just always seems for me like so much space that I never really think about the bandwidth of audio. Next question.
Marty Adias in Maryland here on the panel today says, what resources are available to learn a console you don't have physical access to?
Go ahead, Jeff.
The manual is a great place to go to, especially a block diagram. So a block diagram will show the signal flow through the channel strip of a console, whether it's a virtual console, a digital console, or an analog console. So you can determine what the various switches do when it switches auxes to pre-fader or post-fader. Are those coming before or after mutes, before or after effects, those kind of things. The other thing is if it's a digital console that has a remote control app, like an iPad app, oftentimes those have an offline mode, so you can download the app, which is usually free, and you can actually explore the console that way.
Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, those software apps that emulate the console, those are really nice. If you want to go out and be able to get jobs where you're sitting at a digital mix, at a large mixer, like, in a studio, in a truck or something like that, really helps to become familiar with the workflow of the board, because different manufacturers just have different workflows. They call things different things, whether they're flex buses or mix buses or something else. And being able to learn that workflow before you actually sit down at the desk can be very helpful.
I'm just thinking while you were talking, it'd be really cool if, I think Behringer would be the only company that would do it, if they just took their digital version and they built a sound engine that would run, let's say on a Mac or PC or both, that just took Dante in and Dante out and just was the mixer. Like it just, it did everything the mixer does. You have the virtual interface for that mixer. And it's just, but you can just attach Dante in and out to it. And that way, if someone already knows how to use an X32, they would be able to just immediately use this mixer,
like a Winamp skin, like that.
Yeah,
awesome.
but it would just be this mixer. It would be, because right now the software that Behringer has for it runs the whole mixer, so they already have all the interface, which is the hardest part to do, is done. All they would have to do is build an audio engine that would just do what the mixer does, which they already know how that works. So then you just have I/O going in and out of it as an X32. And you could simply run the mixer. And what's really cool is that you could reverse it where if you had the physical mixer, you could run the software mixer, which may actually be more convenient in some cases than using the digital one. And so it would be and you could have like that'd be a really interesting model, because it just does, people don't have to learn something new. Waves, I know. Douglas is going to tell us somewhere here. Waves does that, but I'm just saying that that'd be an interesting way for Behringer, because why I was thinking about it was it'd be a great way to learn it. Like you just have Dante going in and out, and you can hear it. You can hear everything that's going on. You can set up a bunch of sources, and then you can learn it and do all the things you want to do. And then when you get to the physical mixer, it makes sense. Next question.
Comes from our own Jeff Francis here on the panel, and he's got a question. He's curious as to audio gurus. When would you choose an analog mixer over a digital mixer?
Greg.
Okay, in a panel mixer, in other words, kind of a flat panel with a lot of faders, I would probably choose an analog mixer if I had to make a lot of fast adjustments, and I would grab the knobs, tweak, and go. Or if I wanted a specific coloration from the various types of mixers, there's mixers that have a British EQ. There's you can get colored sounds in an analog mixer. Typically, digital mixers are all fairly flat. They're not colored. If I had to do something where I had a lot of different bands, for instance, or I had to change setups during a variety of songs or anything like that, digital mixer, absolutely, because you can take snapshots and you can set up your scenes and just go boom, 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 and you're ready to go. Instead of analog, it would be a pain. You'd have to recall everything, physically. In a field mixer, however, I can't quite see a place for a digital mixer. You're running and gunning typically all the time, and you want to have those controls right at your fingertips. And you want to be able to, you don't want to be dealing with any kind of menus for setups, like you have on the sound devices, where you set it up at the beginning and it just goes, is fine. But if you have to try and get into individual channels and start changing stuff via menus in a field mixer, I think you're doomed.
Go ahead, Jason.
I can think of two scenarios where I would pick an analog mixer. First, if I'm explaining signal path, if I'm teaching it to somebody, mix minus makes a lot more sense when you can actually see it on a grid. The second one would be a very simple personal mix like a side tone. Other than that, digital.
Jeff.
I would primarily choose digital, but if I were building a recording studio that was primarily designed for tracking, and I needed to do headphone mixes back to a band in that studio time and time again, then the analog mixer has absolutely zero latency. And there's no digital mixer that has that.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree with everyone, with everything everyone said, and Greg covered most of the points. For recording, where you're just tracking, I usually like to go for an analog mixer to keep the most pristine sound path. I would only go to a digital mixer if you're working with pre-recorded material and you're trying to adjust it, because I always like to record as clean a track without much EQ or anything applied to it, kind of like shooting raw in video. You want to keep as much of the frequency response as possible to get onto that tape or storage material, and then later when you have time and you can tweak things to within a gnat's whisker of where it sounds perfect, then you go for the digital mixer where you have a lot more controls. Also, sound routing. If you're in a complex routing situation where you have to do multiple mix minuses or feed, four channels to this camera, 3 channels to that camera, and comms and all that stuff, then a digital mixer makes more sense.
I think I'm always torn because the analog mixer is easier for me to just set up for someone to use, and just like you can see everything. I can look at the board and immediately know where it's at, for the most part. So I used to, on smaller events, I used to use analog boards because it was relatively simple to DX and figure out what's going on. The problem with digital boards is you get in deep and someone made a bunch of changes and you can't figure out why this is not coming out there, and so that was the, and the problem you get into is, especially where this becomes a problem, is when you have 2 different engineers that have 2 very different views of how the board should be set up. And so one will go down a path that is a completely different view of what the slider should be doing versus another. And then they constantly are fighting. Every time one comes in, they reset the whole board and do it their way, and then someone else resets it. And sometimes things fall in between the cracks where they reset something and didn't reset that. And you end up with it goes into a state that can be very difficult. So that is, kind of a complex situation. That said, personally, I would never use an analog board again. I'm so used to all of the tools that I get from a digital board that I could never go back to analog. Because I would feel like my legs and my hands were tied together. Next question.
Comes from Rupert McCrae here on the panel in Dallas, Texas. And he asks, when does a mixer become a desk?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Wherever they speak the Queen's English.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Whenever you can't throw it in a backpack and power it off a 12-volt battery.
Go ahead, Marty.
When the mixer itself has legs.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. That's good. Next question.
Rupert has another one here, and he's back with, are there mixers designed around primary left-handed versus right-handed use?
I think they're all right-handed. I mean, I think that they're all built right-handed that I know of. Go ahead, Marty.
It's more, I think they're designed around the direction of signal flow, where signal usually comes into a device on the left and goes out on the right. And so your input channels are on the left and your buses and outputs are on the right. It's not a matter of handed, it's a matter of signal flow, how you would document it on paper too.
Yeah, good. Greg?
Yeah, most mixers that I know have become quite adept at that workflow. Inputs on the left, outputs and master controls on the right. So, for instance, my left hand always worked the faders, my right hand worked the motion control. Right. So that's just something that you develop.
Unless it's a Hebrew mixer, there might be an exception there.
Maybe.
Oh, okay. I don't know the Hebrew mixer.
Yeah, but well, on a lot of mixers, you can actually that are channel based and channel strips, you can rearrange them however you want them. But usually, the main output panel will be on the right, and you may not be able to move that. So your mix down and your sub channels are usually going to be on the right.
Next question.
McRae for the third time. Do any mixer touchscreen interfaces have haptic feedback, like vibration feedback?
I don't know of any that do, except for the X-Touch that ties into your...
Doesn't PreSonus? I think the PreSonus does.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, Courtney?
I think I haven't seen them, but I've heard of some that have digital recording of the fader positions, but they're not flying faders, so that when you move the fader, there's a little haptic feedback when you hit the spot where the fader's supposed to be at, so you can digitally feel where the faders are supposed to be back if you're supposed to match something and then come in at that level.
Right.
But that would be the only reason I would see of needing something like that. If you don't have a flying fader and you need to match a level that was stored.
I have to admit, I've talked to people who have used both the some kind of touch screen along with the physical, and almost all of them eventually move back to physical, like physical slider. They all thought that it would be great to be able to redefine what they were doing, and almost all of them moved back to something they could actually put their fingers on. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think Slate Digital is working on the haptics, but also I think you're right. I know a number of early adoptees of Slate, and they've kind of gone back.
I mean, it seems like what you want, and everyone watches Star Trek and sees all that stuff and everything else. But when you're having to look down at everything is a problem. Like that's really where you hear having to look down all the time, and also having to just hitting the wrong things because you can't feel it. That's been the kind of the constant feedback I've had. And I've had these are people who designed the systems to be flat panel, and then decided that they just didn't work and went back to regular desks. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and Douglas asks, if you put a synth through the SSL6 before an audio interface or digital mixer, would there be a noticeable sonic difference given that you're driving the preamp properly?
Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, absolutely. It's SSL has just started coming out with their low end of products, and they wanted to get into the game too of getting their sound out there. I will say that the Waves plugin would do it for $38, and I was just looking at it, and the Waves has come up with a new precision analog component technology. So what they're doing is they're redoing all of their plugins with a higher level of emulation and going component by component. So it's going to be interesting in the audio world to see this new precision analog component technology that Waves is going to be putting into their plugins, if they're going to do all version 2 of all these other plugins, or what's going to happen. It's going to shake things up a little bit.
Go ahead, Jason.
The only thing I heard from that response was Waves has found yet another way to nix all of my licenses and make me pay for it again. No, Michael nailed it.
Go ahead, next question.
Danny Law in Malaysia is up next, and he says, there's a saying that 24 channels of faders plus a master section of a digital sound console is more manageable than a 32 or 48 discrete channel layout. Any thoughts on that?
Good, Jeff.
If you have the time to set up your DCAs and grouping, it can be, but I would still rather have like 32 physical input faders. 48 gets a little large, that you can't reach across that as easily.
Greg?
I think it depends. It depends on the size, the footprint that you want, in your studio, and typically how big are your sessions. I mean, for large film mixing sessions, for instance, you need all those faders. They like to have a lot of faders, and you want to see all the channels. So having to scroll through banks is not very good for the workflow.
Yeah, I've been working recently at one that does a lot of film mixing, and I think the slot, I don't know how many banks there are. It's probably 80, like 80 sliders that are something, maybe more. And it's 30 feet long. And the way they get but the things that they're managing are in one section, so all the strings are here, all this is over here. And the way that they scroll through it is they have these nice chairs that roll across the wood. They can roll over to it and play with it and then roll back to where they were going. Or oftentimes when they're really doing these, they have 3 or 4 or 5 people that are all sitting there working on different parts of it, which is kind of an amazing thing to watch. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, that is exactly what I was going to say. It depends on your setup in film mixing. Traditionally, it's been 3 mixers at the console at a time. So you've got, six hands that can grab those faders, and so they need to be spread out far enough so that the mixers aren't running into each other. There's one for sound effects, one for music, and one for dialogue. And in bigger, there are even bigger mixes. But with the advent of the digital recording and instant re-rack and everything else, you can handle it with one person and a smaller console with 24 faders and just switch between banks. But if you have to make multiple changes to different channels that are far apart, you spend a lot of time.
I used to think the number of sliders didn't matter until we really started doing bigger shows. And then you just realize having all of that analog input, not analog necessarily a mixer, made just a massive difference. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas is back in with, how many channels do you like for headroom? And I think in this case he means growth capacity in your mixer. Is this like rack space and always worth oversizing?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I think it's more often that a mixer is selected for a particular job or a particular venue. And in that case, you do always plan for the biggest event and then go a little bit larger. But if you're purchasing it for personal use, that's a little tougher call. You don't want a humongous 64-channel mixer if you're dealing with, 5 channels most of the time.
Is it 56 or 57 channels on a Digico we had it.
57 is not an audio number.
I didn't think so. I thought it was, for some reason I thought it was wrong, but it's 56. I remember we just had a job that was not a couple weeks ago where they said, well, it'll be more than 56 because we have because that's how many are in the Digico. And then we got there and they had 2. so it was turned out to be 90, 92 tracks or something like that. Next question.
From Jeff Francis, and he's brushing up against audio religion. Audio gurus, do you prefer a mute button or a channel on button?
Jason?
Okay, I'll wade into these waters. It really depends on the console I'm using. I really liked the way that Mackie analog consoles would give you mute versus alt as an output. That was really great. As far as a digital console, I could say I could go either way.
Go ahead, Greg.
For me, I would take a mute every time. I'd rather see a light when it's inactive versus seeing a light when it's active. I know that's kind of counterintuitive, but it's more of a warning to me.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, for portable recording or field recording, having a button that turns off that channel is important because you're going to conserve battery power, because almost all of them are battery powered. And being able to switch off a channel that you're not using will save you, if it's an 8-channel mixer, 1/8 of your power that you're consuming.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, the SSL6 offers 2 stereo inputs without EQ. Would routing a source through it still give the SSL sound?
Go ahead, Jason.
Kindly tell me what the SSL sound is, and I'll be sure to listen for it.
I don't know what the SSL sound is. Go ahead, Greg.
I don't know exactly what the line inputs on that mixer are, if there's any. I mean, I think just actually going through the electronics of the board would give it a color. But if it's a pass through, I don't know how much of a color it would give it.
Next question.
Jeff Francis asks, Audio Gurus, what is patched into channel 1 of your mixer?
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Neumann KM 150.
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm a voice talent. My main mic.
Jeff?
I can't believe we didn't get the answer. It should be kick. Kick in. Kick drum is always
According
channel
to
1.
Behringer, yeah.
Go ahead,
No.
Chris. No. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
No, I agree with Jeffrey. I used to put the drums at the far left, when I mixed music, I was on a big 48 channel mixer. I would always put the drums at the far end. I'd put all the like line level stuff at the far right. I had a center section with all the VCAs, and then I would put things that I needed to make tiny adjustments, relatively, depending on how little I needed to touch it. I could adjust all the drums, but I think that's kind of what you're talking about. Some people will start with vocals. I like to start with the drums way out there.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas. What control surfaces should an audio engineer wanting to work from home invest in?
Control surfaces. I mean, yeah, go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, there's the Behringer Touch Mix, which
X-Touch,
can,
right?
X-Touch, right? Which can control all of the Behringer products, plus many other things, because it just translates very well. It can interface to audio DAWs for editing and for processing, but there are other products that I'd have to look up that have faders and buttons and controls as well that can be mapped through MIDI. So it's a very wide open field.
Go ahead, Greg.
I think at last count there were 4,321 different control surfaces that are available, and it depends on what are you controlling? Are you using it to control your DAW? Are you controlling your mixer recorder? There's so many good ones. For me, it's difficult to, and it's also a question of price point. Neve has control surfaces. Avid, of course, has a full line for Pro Tools. There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, the ones that we probably use the most are the X-Touch, and then I've used a couple of the Icon. I have never had the money to spend on the Avids. Next question.
Danny Law in Malaysia is up next. If you are given a choice of choosing your IOs via AVB, Dante, or MADI, any reasons for preferring one over the other, although it does depend on the use case, he says.
I guess what I would say here, until someone else jumps in, we tend to build a lot of the stuff under Dante, but I would be very careful with Dante. Dante in a portable environment needs time. You need time to see if the clocking is working and everything else. If it's not all yours, like if you're interacting with anybody else on any other network, what Dante does when it can't find the clock is it just stops audio for about 3 seconds. So sometimes longer as it resets. And it's the number one thing that kills you. And I've had it recently. And so you need time, or you need to make sure you have absolute control of your network. It doesn't touch anything else, and it's something you tested in the office over many hours, because otherwise it'll sneak up on you. But otherwise, I prefer Dante for almost everything. Go ahead, Marty.
So MADI is like SDI for audio. It's a point-to-point connection, and it just works. And
it doesn't just work.
It doesn't? No? You've had problems with MADI?
It doesn't work when you touch Blackmagic with it. That's
no. I'm not talking about that. Yeah.
I've used MADI with like Soundcraft consoles where I was going to another device like a multi-track recorder, and it's usually over a fiber connection, and it if it didn't work, I've had an experience where it didn't work, and it was because the console MADI driver or port wasn't working or something. But AVB, on the other hand, is like you need specialized networking switches, gear that are certified to be AVB, and that. But the advantage that AVB has over Dante is that, in addition to the audio streams, it can also control the devices. So if you need gain control or something over preamps that are away from you, it can do that over, the same connection. Dante is primarily the audio stream itself, and it doesn't really do control. You have to do controls separately.
Yeah. I was trying to find something really quickly for you, but the we used recently Matty because we thought it would be you could just plug it in and it wouldn't be. And at this point, if I did it again, I would have dropped Dante stage boxes that only went to us and brought everything back. Let them analog into it, like just drop it in and not deal with their consoles at all. Because it was just the Matty lost a lot of skin on that Matty interface. So because I thought, it's just Matty, it'll just work. Exactly what you talked about. And I'd probably never use Matty again by choice after that experience. Next question.
One Alex Lindsay out of Nevada, California has decided that the Waves plugin folks need more things during the Black Friday cycle we're in.
They're so inexpensive.
What should I have out of their catalog?
So these guys have the drug thing down pat, like the drug dealer thing down pat. Not only during Black Friday is it $39, but if you buy more of them together, each one after that is like I'm up to where it's 50% off every single one of them. So they're all like $17. So I'm like, I just need to make sure I don't miss any because I don't want to go back to having to pay whatever the regular price is. So I'm just curious what people would. I have a stack of them that I haven't pulled the trigger on yet. But I want to make sure I don't miss any. Go ahead, Michael.
They've cracked the Filene's basement sales model.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it is so genius because it's like, and when you buy it, it goes, you could get 20% more off if you buy another one, and then you could get 30% more off. You get 40% more off, and I was like, well, what else could I get? And how many could I buy? And now I'm at like 6 or 7, and they're and they look really good, and they're a lot of Michael's suggestions and some other so and the meters and that I don't have any Waves plugins. So this is like I was just like I'm gonna add a bunch of these. So anyway, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, but the addiction will catch up with you when they come back to you for the subscription because you have to renew it like every year.
It's not subscription, it's the WUP. It's the Waves Up-to-Date program. And the Waves Up-to-Date program is a little bit controversial, but I don't think so. If you don't want to pay the WUP, you can lock down your system. But if you pay the WUP, they're constantly updating the software. And it's worth it. I pay the WUP Waves Update program, and it's flawless. But I've been on Waves since 2.0. So, and they're on Waves 13 now. I'm going to mention 3 plugins that I would get. The J37 tape this is from Abbey Road Studios, and they have that cool musical effect that you can push in the button and the music just grinds to a halt. And it's a great musical effect that you hear a lot in today's music. And not to mention the tape effect and as I said before, it's the sweetest noise you'll ever hear. They have a noise button and you can dial in the amount of digital hiss, and the digital hiss is the sweetest hiss you'll ever hear. And another thing I use a lot on every recording for pop music is Abbey Road TG mastering chain. This will get you, it's only $29 now, 85% off, and it gets you into the ballpark for mastering, even when you compare it to Ozone 9, it gets you in that ballpark. And then you have some fine tweaking and some other things you have to do. But the Abbey Road mastering chain plugin is awesome. And then the last one I would recommend right now is the Abbey Road Saturator. It gives you a nice digital fuzz and just kind of thickens and warms up the sound.
That's great. Go ahead, Jason.
Wow, that's quite a list. I would say the L2, the C6 and the C4 are really, really useful compressors. And Vocal, what is it called? Vocal Rider Live has been useful over the years.
And go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, there's a couple other ones I like. I like the low air for a for sub work. And I forget the name of the specific one, but it's their pitch shift program. Maybe somebody can help me out, Michael. Which one is that?
Are you talking about Berserker?
No.
Vicky says it's called Waves Tune.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of them. There's the vocal bender, and there's the vocal resynthesis.
No, it's one, and you can get a clean octave up and down, which in a software pitch shifter is kind of unheard of. So, I like that.
Go ahead, Marty. Can you hear us? Hello, Marty.
Yeah. I didn't have anything to add to that one.
Okay, go ahead, Courtney.
Sorry. I don't have a wave suggestion, but just an observation that the entire last century in sound, the Holy Grail was going for the cleanest, most accurate recording of sound with the least amount of noise, the least amount of distortion.
That's just absurd.
And now the next century we started is how to add all that stuff back in now that we achieved it.
we finally got rid of it. Let's put it all back in. But I think that is really the challenge of digital, is that you get so clean that it feels, the reaction I think of that is that it feels very, it just lacks life. I think that, I think that what makes things special, like the funny thing about people in general is that our friends what we like about them is all their quirkiness. Like it's not the fact that they're perfect, and I built whole texture map things about, I built a whole texture map collection that funded my first company based on the fact that computer graphics don't look good when they're perfect. They look good when they're beat up and they've got, stuff that's, hanging off of them and all kinds of other stuff is what makes them feel real. And so, so anyway, it is interesting though that we're putting it all back. All right, next question.
Another one from an Alex L in Nevada, California. Where can I use Waves plugins?
So where does it go? I just realized I know some of the places, but I just want to make sure that, Michael, you're using them in Logic.
Yes, I use it in Logic and Final Cut Pro, and you can even throw a couple into Audio Hijack if you want to.
Right, but you have to be careful with Audio Hijack, right? Because they just have to. The question is whether it'll work in real time or not.
It doesn't work for me. No, yeah, some of the Audio Hijacks, it's very temperamental. In fact, I have a weird situation where Loopback and a few of the other and Audio Hijack don't even see my audio interface.
Right.
So yeah.
Go ahead, Greg.
I was going to say one of the best things about Waves plugins to me is the fact that you can use them in virtually any room in your home. They're not, it's not just confined to your office. You could do it in the living room. You could use it in your kitchen if you wanted to.
I love a subtle reverb in the bathroom.
I would like a reverb.
It's just right.
I would like a reverb for my knife cutting. I want to have it feel like I'm in a giant kitchen.
And you pull down under Save Preset, and you hit it.
You know what they need is they need a
bathroom tone.
They need a processor that you can load into your AirPods where you can create your own experience of the world. So basically it just takes the mic in and then you can have Waves plugins on it. So it adds a little bit of grunge to the world, or it adds a little bit of reverb to everything, anyway.
Alex, have you ever wanted a yodeling closet? Because I don't know about you, but I always have.
Oh yeah. Well, how did I ever live with that one? All right. Next question.
More spruce chopping block, less oak. Robert Soji in Los Angeles says, any recommendations using mixing control surfaces for Logic Pro?
We're waiting for Michael to raise his hand, but he hasn't because he doesn't have a mixing surface.
Well, you can just use the iPad, of course. The iPad has a Logic remote with the digital pads and all those things. And you can, if you have an iPad, I would just use that to get started with. The Mackie control surfaces, the model, there's a lot out there. But they're virtual. They're not They're controlling logic. They're not digital mixers or anything like that. They're just control surfaces.
Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, up next with, are any audio mixer manufacturers doing a reliable job of engaging with their customers digitally with experts or webinars online?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Not necessarily. They have audio mixer manufacturers come in. I think Gotham Audio does a great job of providing a lot of informational and instructional videos on sound equipment, so you can always look there. Curtis Judd also has a great YouTube channel for analyzing and reviewing audio equipment.
Yeah, go, Jason.
I'd be remiss if I don't mention our friends at Sound Devices who have done amazing one-on-one stuff for us repeatedly.
Absolutely. Marty? I can't hear you, Marty.
Presonus has tons and tons of material out there on the web, training videos and use videos, and just labs and all kinds of things. And some of them are really short, very topic focused, and some of them are more extensive.
Some companies also don't necessarily interact directly, so they don't do their own videos. And the reason they don't do that is it's very hard for them to get through the brand requirements. So you may think that, for them to actually talk about it freely would take so many layers of people to approve it that they don't bother. But what they do is, support support people who are talking about their product. And that's it's just easier to get through and it's not even necessarily large companies. It's just that it's much easier to have somebody else talk about it. They can speak freely, and if things aren't perfect, that's fine. But if it's largely positive and largely educational about their product, a lot of times they'll help a little bit to make that work. And I think that's actually a far more effective solution than brands doing it themselves. The one company that does do an enormous amount, I don't know how much they do about their mixing consoles, but Blackmagic, just the training is constant and very high quality. Like, just so you know, if you see those little webinars go by about Resolve and everything else, they do a great job, and Ripple Training kind of fills in all the gaps, from where they are from their software perspective. So it's definitely worth checking out the Blackmagic stuff, because it's all free and it's hidden on their website. It's very hard to find, but there's video after video after video. And then they do 4-day sessions on Fairlight and 4-day sessions on color correction, and they're very high quality. I would definitely check it out. Next question. Oh, Marty, sorry. No, that's it. Go ahead. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas, up next with noise cancellation like Noise Assist or Cedar seems more likely to be found on field recorders. What mixers have any comparable noise reduction features for live production?
Yamaha has it built in. Yamaha has their own noise reduction that we've tested head to head with Cedar. I don't think it's as good as Cedar. It's not I don't think that it's perfect. It's a lot cheaper. So if you want to have something, the latest updates on the QLs series, I know, I'm sure the CLs have it as well, have a noise reduction unit that's built into it. It isn't bad, just not as good as Cedar and not as good as Noise Assist. I have a feeling that now that Sound Devices is part of a larger family, it seems like it would be logical for Noise Assist to find it into a lot of other mixing consoles. It seems like an obvious that in their preamps. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. If you are routing synths into a console like the Allen Heath SQ series, and he's got a link there, would it be best to use a direct box before the console to protect against inadvertent 48-volt phantom power activation?
Go ahead, Jason.
I have never heard of inadvertent 48-volt power activation. My rule is always direct box if you're going out from a synth.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones, just north of Disneyland, says, in a larger indoor seated venue, what is the best place for the mixer? How about an outdoor concert? Are there indoor or outdoor mixers particularly as well?
Curious. Yeah, go ahead, Marty.
Well, when you're mixing for an audience, you have to be in the sweet spot so that you can hear what they're hearing. I'm constantly baffled when I go to a show, especially an outdoor show, and I see the sound mixer set up like backstage or behind the main mixers. You can't hear what's going on out there. But center in the like back half of the room, not against the back wall, because you'll get that reflection zone. Indoor outdoor mixers, I don't know of any mixers that are IP rated for outdoor use, but they would always go under a tent.
Courtney.
Yeah, Marty just said it. I don't know of any outdoor mixers there. Too many ways that water can leak in and blow things up. So I would not use a mixer in the rain, especially one that's plugged into AC.
We had a show where the over the mixer there was an awning, and it was raining, and it was at a stadium, and it just kept on getting like deeper and deeper and deeper, and all you could do is just stare at it, just going no, and then finally it just collapsed on top of the mixer, and and then the artist, who's acoustic, I won't name who it is because people will probably triangulate the concert, who's very acoustically talented, came out and did an acoustic, like they got enough running that he could play his guitar, like the mixer was gone and everything else, he could play his guitar he had his guitar and his mic. And the reason I bring this up is that it was a formative moment, in my opinion, about concerts, is that they had all this pomp and circumstance and all these lights and all this other stuff and everything else. And it was an amazing show, and it was in a big stadium, and there were tens of thousands of people, and it all fell apart because it rained. And then the rain stopped, and they got the mixer was done, and they figured out how to route it and patch it and get enough. They had some portable whatever. And this artist, well-known artist, walked out and did an acoustic by himself with his guitar of all of his hits and everything else for the band. It's the best ever. Like, I've seen him a couple times, like unbelievable. Like just the most intimate, connection. And when he got the audience singing, because everyone knew all his songs, when he would get the audience singing, the audience really felt like they were part of the show. It's not like they were kind of part of the show. They could hear each other in a way that you don't hear in a main concert. And it was just magical, and it was literally 2/3 of the concert. And it was literally like, I was like, I just want that all the time. Like that's what I want, from these artists is that really that deep connection. It was really, really fascinating. Next question.
Comes from Douglas Carmichael. The Stone Pony in New Jersey, the venue, still keeps an APB analog console at front of house, despite having an Avid SC48 at monitors. Considering the younger generation of engineers has been raised on digital, do you think staying with analog is a wise choice?
Go ahead, Greg.
Well, I think that probably the Stone Pony has an analog console up in the FOH position because they like the sound, and it sounds good in their room, and they want to keep that good sound in their room. Yeah. So, is it a wise choice for them? Absolutely. If you're a mixer, you have to learn different consoles. When we were somewhat younger, we had to learn digital. So now it's time for the younger guys to learn analog.
There we go, Jason.
Wow, Greg's answer was pretty much perfect. I don't think I could have learned digital mixing without an analog signal flow.
Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, well, the Stone Pony in particular is a legendary venue that made a legendary artist legendary, and that's probably the console that was used, and I think it's a branding choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Marty 80 is in Maryland here on the panel, says, what other plug-in resources do people use besides Waves?
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I'm kind of a gear slut, as they say over there, and I've got 2,000 plugins. And I'm going to mention some companies that excel in some, and there's so much that you can check out. I'm just going to go down alphabetically. Apogee has wonderful plugins. Bob Clearmountain is designing them. They are amazing. Something to take a look at. Arturia, very high quality plugins, very, very good. Go check them out. Black Rooster is having a great sale right now with their entire list of plugins for $98. So you can get their entire line for $98, and it's usually over $1,000. So it's a really good deal right now. Cytomic makes a very high quality plugins. Empirical Labs, Fab Filter, can't live without Fab Filter. There's just so many plugins there that are great quality. You have a question, Alex?
No.
Oh, okay. Isotope, of course, you can use Nectar and Neutron on your vocals and on your instruments. Very good plugins. Cush Audio. It's funny, Douglas was asking about the direct box, using a direct box. Cush Audio makes something called Ready, a Ready plugin that emulates a direct box. So people, they make plugins for everything. Leapwing Audio. Amazing quality out of, I think, Belgium, and they have some really, really high-end mastering plugins. Dyne13 is a multi-band plugin. It's tremendous. They just came out with a brand new one called Ultravox for vocals, and it's very, very good. McDSP, tons there to go take a look at. Really fun one to look at is their
I think we're going to cut you off and think about a second hour talking about plugins. No. What I got was I was like, we're running out of time at the end of the hour, but there's a whole second hour that we want to do about plugins.
I got to M.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
Sorry.
But no. It was great. What it illustrated to me was how deep that water is, and I think that, and you're illustrating that. If people are interested, put that into the second hour. I think that we just want to not dedicate the last 2 minutes of an hour to it. We want to dedicate an hour to plugins and what they do and everything else. So thanks, Michael. And I just want you to know, it's great. I just was like, oh yeah, this is something we should cover in detail. So we will. So we'll make sure that you're going to be on. so yeah, as our expert, go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, Michael hit all of the high notes, including a lot that I am not familiar with. So
that's why I was thinking. I was like, I have no idea what he's talking about. Like, we need to dig deep into this. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
But I wanted to give some. I wanted to give some
go ahead, Marty.
I wanted to give some love to the Plugin Alliance, which is one of the first resources that I found. So there's a bunch of manufacturers who sell through the Plugin Alliance, and they have some end of the year amazing sales. And they send out discount coupons like all year long, and they send really, really high quality stuff.
That's great. Plugin Alliance.
Yeah, Plugin Alliance with a hyphen in the middle. I put it in the chat.
Good, Bill.
I was just going to note that I use the Universal Audio hardware system, and that takes some of the DSP processing off of your main computer and allows you to get some really high quality stuff without having to bog down if you want to use a lot of things your computer. So there's a lot of, and Michael may have gotten there eventually, but that's another big system.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, Green Day tours with a customized Rupert Neve Designs 5088 console. He's got a link there. Considering the rarity of such a console in the live world, wouldn't it be safer to use a more common piece for a critical tour?
Go ahead, Greg.
If you're considering the failure, then yeah, it probably would be safer. My guess is they have that console because they like the sound, and I think that sound probably would win out over safety.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, exactly, Greg. Yeah, if you look at this console, it's got an analog meter bridge and all the analog inputs, and once they package that up for touring, it's their sound. It's their sound that they've been known for. They put it on all their records, and they want to reproduce that sound when they're out on tour. And maybe they think that the only way to do that is to use the same equipment that they used in the studio, and so they figure out a way to package it up, put it on a 40-footer truck, and truck it around.
Go ahead, Marty.
I would bet they actually have two of them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think our term for all of these requests that we get from artists is, well, it's your nickel. like it's just going to be like, I'm just going to tell you how, I don't care what you put out there. I'll just tell you how much it costs to have it there and have it be reliable. And if you're going to have 70,000 people in there, it's 2 or 3. I probably have a primary and a backup up with one in the box. It's probably, so there's probably 3 of them floating around there on the tour. So that would be, yeah, but it's, they have the money to do it. Isn't it great to have the juice to say that I want to take something that's totally absurd out there? I will say in their defense is that many artists have asked us to do crazy things that I thought wouldn't make any difference. And, it was just a huge headache And it did. I'm very careful to say, be logistical and say it doesn't matter. But there have been many times when the artist wants to do something that I just look at like that is just the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. And it's going to take us an enormous amount of work. It's going to be 90% of our effort and 10% of the show. But there's something about, and that's when I get edgy, is when I feel like 90% of our time is going to be spent on this thing that's only going to be here for a little bit. But when it makes a difference, I'm like, okay, I was wrong. And so we always want to be careful of because sometimes it actually does distinguish itself. And it gives it that extra little like bump that, that little magic that you have on your show. So we always want to be careful of discounting it. All right. That was a good hour. As always. The Tuesday hours are always just great audio geekery. Love it. So thank you so much to the panelists who show up, our audio experts who show up and contribute back to everyone. And thank you to the panel for the producers to ask all the great questions, keep the conversation driving forward. Tuesday is really just such a great audio hour. And so anyway, I just really appreciate all of you contributing back to the group. And tomorrow, remember, we have AJA with the Bridge Live and Bridge NDI. So definitely do some research, and it's kind of special to get these folks there. So I just want to make sure that we have lots of questions and an active. I get nervous when I start bringing in companies to make sure that we really have great questions and keep it moving forward. So let's work on that a little bit, and we'll jump into the after hours now.